Welcome to Radnor Studio 21 and Relationship Matters. My name is Linda Hershman, host of the show and owner of the Couples and Family Wellness Center, a full-service mental health counseling center with offices in Berwyn and Paoli. Today we're going to be speaking about the language of eating disorders, what to say and what not to say when you suspect that a loved one might have an eating disorder. And I would like to introduce my guest, Jennifer Kreatsoulas, PhD. She has a lot of other initials after her name that I'm going to let her explain because I have enough trouble keeping track of my own. And I just want to say on a personal note that if you're feeling the love today, it's because Jennifer and I go back a long way, probably close to 25 years, when I was in training to become a therapist and she was working as a barista in Starbucks, and we got to chatting one day and clicked and stayed connected through the many, many years and all the iterations of our careers. And it's a particular thrill to have Jennifer here today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited about being here with you.
So, first of all, those initials, tell us a little bit about them and also what it is that you do.
Sure. So you mentioned PhD. I have a PhD from Lehigh University in literature. And the other initials are related to my work in the yoga world. So I have been a registered yoga teacher for close to probably 15, 16 years now. I have over 500 hours of training, so that's what the ERYT 500 means. And then the other set of initials represents my certification as a yoga therapist. So I'm certified through the International Association of Yoga Therapists, and that training is well over 1,000 hours. And I've taken that training and now share it with others in eating disorder recovery, calling on the tools, the practices, the philosophies of yoga to support them in their journey. That's been my personal story, so it is a true honor and blessing to be able to give back to the eating disorder community, to be involved in the yoga community in this very unique way. So I'm really living my purpose.
Would you mind sharing what your journey has been?
So my journey started in college a long time ago. In fact, I just went to my 20th reunion, which was just bizarre. So it was way back then that my journey began. I was on the crew team. I have always been an athlete all my life. I loved playing basketball, soccer, softball, put me on any team, and I would just enjoy it. I would thrive. I loved it. I was always the best at what I did, and wanted to kind of carry that into my college years of being an athlete, although I wasn't playing on any of the college's teams. So I gave crew a try and loved it. Absolutely fell in love with it. My second year rowing, though, we had a coach who said something that changed my relationship with how I viewed my body and really set into motion an eating disorder. Now, I'm not blaming the coach for what he said. It was how I internalized his words. And there are probably a lot of other things in place in my life that, that an eating disorder was probably possible just from different things. But the words that he said were, I can tell how hard you work by how your body changes. And I heard those words and they really went deep inside of me. And it was the first time ever that I thought, oh, now I have to prove myself through my body, like how it looks. I just used my body to have fun on the basketball court, boxing out or running as fast as I can from, to first base. Like it never was a thing of, well, what does it look like? And so now I was faced with this new task. And as someone who was a perfectionist, a people pleaser, wanted to be the best on the team, wanted to please certainly my coach and my teammates, now I had a challenge. And what very innocently started off as, systematically cutting down on how much I ate, which turned into cutting out whole food groups, which turned out to cutting out whole meals, which turned out to just full on restriction, I found myself, with an eating disorder. And I didn't know that's what I was doing. Like, I didn't set out to self-destruct. I didn't set out to hurt my body. I just wanted to prove that I had a strong work ethic and that my team could rely on me, and that my coach could see that I was working hard. So that was what kind of put the journey in motion, that event. I really, truly remember that so viscerally in my body, like hearing those words and what kind of transpired after. My health declined so rapidly that I didn't have a choice but to go into treatment probably about a year later. And once I started treatment and had the knowledge of what was going on with me and why this was happening, that, the eating disorder was a way to cope with, fears about being inadequate or fears of being a failure, and a whole slew of other things that I'm sure we'll talk about, right? Yes. Once I had that information, I then, had something to work with. I knew what this was about. Sometimes, though, we know what these behaviors are about, but they still are with us. And so fast forward to, just, 5-6 years ago, when I was, about to have a second child and was feeling so overwhelmed by, my oldest was not even 2 yet. And so I had just finally started sleeping again, and then boom, I'm pregnant. Right? And that was really overwhelming to then, never really catch up on sleep. And I really lost myself in motherhood. I mean, I adore my children. I love my children. I wouldn't trade being a mom for anything. But just the demands on my physical being, my mental being, my emotional being, my brain just remembered, okay, this is how you cope when you're stressed out, when you're really, really overwhelmed. You just start, restricting your food, because that's the way that you can feel like you have some power in your life, right? I really believe that eating disorders are a response to feeling powerless in some way in one's life. And because we are taught in our society that we can have power through our bodies, right? That it becomes this tug of war with changing ourselves in a way to somehow prove that we have power. So it's kind of complicated, right? But at that point, when this relapse was occurring, I was really aware that it was happening, and I reached a point where I knew that I needed help again, and that was okay. That was okay, because I wanted to be a certain kind of mother. I wanted to be a present mother, not an ill mother. And so I went back to treatment and got the help that I needed.
And can I also, would it be fair to say that you wanted your relationship to be with your children and your husband as opposed to with food?
That's right. That's right. I wanted to be present to them. It was Mother's Day and we went for a walk in the park, and I was too weak to push the stroller. It was a terrible moment, but it was probably one of the best moments, because it opened my eyes again to like, okay, this is not fair to your family. This is not who you want to be. It's just time to get some help again, and there's no shame in that.
And where do yoga and eating disorders intersect?
Yes. So I found yoga shortly after when I was beginning graduate school. So this was after I had done an inpatient stay during college, inpatient treatment and a few rounds of day treatment, because so often the recovery process, the healing process is, it's like this, right? So you go into treatment, get better, come back out, still have some things to work on, go back in, right? So I found yoga kind of after that phase of in and out of treatment. And I found it because I was really missing that part of myself who used to be active. But I also knew that it wasn't really safe for me to go back to the gym, because overexercise was a part of my initial presentation of the eating disorder. So it wasn't safe for me to go back to the gym. I was at a point in my life where I really wasn't going to join a team. But I was missing being active, that part of my personality. So yoga was, the new thing. It was kind of, everyone was doing it. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And it wasn't long before I started learning to just appreciate my body in a new way, paying attention to it in a new way, learning its own language, that it has its own sensations and, intelligence. And yoga became a pathway or a tool to be able to help me tune into that, right? Because that tuning inward, paying attention to my body is so counterintuitive to an eating disorder.
Yes.
Right? It's the exact opposite. It's you're trying to escape your body, trying to numb. And so when I'm working with clients now, we're looking at different philosophies of yoga to help bring into help with maybe shifting some core beliefs that are disempowering. We're using movement as a way to reconnect with our bodies, and then as someone who is on the support team, as the yoga therapist, the client has someone to talk to about, so what was that experience like? Because it's not always pretty. It doesn't always feel good. A lot of times it's really scary to come back home to our bodies. Right? So the movement provides that aspect, as does learning how to breathe. Right? A lot of times people are walking around with anxiety, depression, eating disorders, a combination of breathing up here, right? And the nervous system is really always on guard looking for that tiger, right? Because the nervous system's amped up. So just learning how to breathe, helping people to realize that they do have these tools within themselves to soothe and calm and get grounded. And ultimately we're turning toward our bodies to help heal our minds.
And this is congruent with a lot of the work I do as a therapist, both with trauma in particular and anxiety disorders and other issues in a general sense. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm always communicating to clients is that they're called feelings because we feel them in our bodies.
That's right.
And we as a culture are not taught to pay attention to what our bodies are telling us, and then to know what to do with that information and how to calm that autonomic nervous system.
That's exactly right. So a lot of the work that I'm doing is, for example, if you had a client who I was also working with, right? I always like to explain it as...
Which may have happened.
Yes, that's actually right.
Yes.
As things are getting stirred up in talk therapy, right, then they can come to me and we can, create some hands-on practices and tools to help cope with what's coming up, right? To help cope in a healthy way, in a way that's in tune with, okay, so you're feeling shame. Where does that live in your body? What's the internal dialogue around that? How can maybe we bring in some type of philosophy to help create a new perspective on that? Right? And then how can we take what we learn in session and begin integrating it in life? So I definitely see myself very much as part of it, part of the team.
Part of a team,
Part
yes.
of a team. And I'm not the replacement for therapy, not the replacement for, working with a dietitian. Yoga therapy is like a supplement to that work.
Something we're not going to do today is offer a crash course in the types of eating disorders, in bulimia, anorexia, binge eating disorder. However, can you talk about eating disorders in a broad sense, the way that you see them, both from a cultural and whatever other perspective you might view them?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you asked that, because so often the understanding is that an eating disorder equals anorexia, which equals thin, white, middle class, upper middle class, female, adolescent, right? And I think that's the understanding, because that's where most of the research has taken place, right? And that specific eating disorder with anorexia, that's shifting big time. And the reality is that eating disorders come in all shapes, sizes, genders, backgrounds, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic, that they don't just look like, a young, thin, adolescent person, woman or girl, right? Adolescent girl. So I think just, if anything, I would love viewers to understand from our talk today is that that's the reality, right? And so you don't have to be engaging with someone who's emaciated for there to be an eating disorder present. And that we live in a society that has so confused us around how to feed ourselves, and has created such unfair beauty standards around which bodies fit and which bodies do not. So even if someone doesn't have a clinical eating disorder, there can certainly be disordered eating, or just, this idea of, maybe the chronic dieter, right? Or always concerned about what they're eating, if it's good or it's bad, what their body looks like, striving to change it, right? It's all connected. I really believe that we're all on some kind of spectrum here, right?
That is a really good way to put it. So, for example, I'm thinking about a conversation with a client that I had recently where she had told me that she had eliminated a particular food group because, quote unquote, everyone was saying it was healthier not to eat it. And when I asked her, what negative impacts does eating it have on you? She said, not at all. Well, are there any medical reasons for you not to eat it? No, not at all. Mm-hmm. And what happens when you're not eating it, but then you want it? Well, then I binge on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what gets set up. Let's talk about language for a moment, because this is, like I said, you can get an overview on eating disorders anywhere, but your expertise is in the language of eating disorders. And inadvertently, we say the totally wrong things to people when we suspect that they're in trouble. So can you talk about how you can communicate with somebody when you're concerned that they may be experiencing an eating disorder or disordered eating, or just in some kind of trouble with food? And then we'll go to, well, you can choose. Do you want to start with what you should never say or how you can communicate?
Let's start with how we can.
Okay.
That just sounds nicer.
We'll bring them up, bring them down, bring them back up.
Exactly. Always uplifting.
Yes.
So someone who's struggling with an eating disorder is so hyper-focused on food and their body. So if you approach someone and talk to them about something different than food and body, you're much more likely to be heard, right? Because I can tell you honestly, when I was in the height of my eating disorder, if someone commented to me on my body or food trying to express concern, I would defend my behavior to the death, right? I was not ready to change. I didn't want to hear it. Someone who says to me, you just haven't been yourself lately. You seem a little preoccupied. Is everything okay? Well, that's a very different feeling than, hey, you're not eating. What's the matter with you? Right?
Yes.
Right?
Because then you're getting in a power struggle with the eating disorder.
That's right. So always remember that the person you're talking to is a whole person. It's not about their body. It's not about their food. If you're expressing concern, that's likely coming from a place inside of you that is very real and authentic, and allow that person to see that. I'm concerned about you. You've been staying in your room a lot. I haven't seen any of your friends around. Hey, I noticed that something's going on with your grades, or, you haven't been joining us for movie night on Friday. Like, thinking about things beyond body and food, and just giving a heartfelt concern and knowing that all you can do is express that heartfelt concern, and they will receive it when they're ready. Right? If you get the sense that they are in true medical danger, or even mental or emotional danger, then taking steps, depending on the relationship, is probably a good thing. So there are resources like the National Eating Disorder Association, NEDA. They have a great website that you can go to and read about the different eating disorders, different resources for getting help, even more on this topic of what to say, what not to say. And so if you try to reach out and you're not getting anything back and your concern continues to grow, that might be a place to look and get some guidance.
And would it be appropriate to say to somebody, I see that you seem really uncomfortable, or whatever it is that you're noticing, and I'm wondering if you'd like to talk about it?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Express the concern and then open the door for a discussion. Absolutely. Yes. And if they say yes, then do your best to listen. And if they say no, do your best to accept that and just reiterate that you're here, you love them. And if you ever do want to talk, the door's open.
And would you also suggest saying to somebody, and if you're interested in talking with somebody professionally, I can give you some names of people?
Absolutely. I can help get some resources for you. In our area here, we have the Renfrew Center, we have Montanito. There's some other organizations that do work with eating disorders. So we're really lucky to have resources at our fingertips here in the Radnor/Philadelphia area.
Right, we do have a number of resources, and there are plenty of outpatient therapists who specialize in working with eating disorders as
and
well.
I also welcome people to reach out to me through my website. I'm always happy to answer questions, help direct people to where they need to be, because eating disorders are serious.
Yes.
They're very serious.
Potentially life-threatening.
Yes, they're very serious.
And I'm going to put out there the number one and number two things you should never say to somebody whom you suspect has an eating disorder. Number one, you look too thin, you should gain some weight. Or, well, just go ahead and eat it.
Yes.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I mean, I think there's a lot I want to add to that, but I'll just add this piece because I think this is a good message for all of us. Our society's focus on weight needs to shift. So commenting on people's bodies, no matter what, whether they're too thin or the opposite, we need to stop that. Just right out, we need to stop it. So I think, amen, right? Because it doesn't help any of us. And so for someone who's dealing with anorexia, and which, by the way, you don't have to be super thin to have anorexia, if they hear that they're losing weight, that's going to just keep driving things. Someone who's, dealing with it in a different way, any comments about their weight, it's just going to keep driving things. So just don't comment on weight. Don't comment on bodies. Don't comment on your children's bodies. Don't comment on your spouse's bodies. Don't comment on strangers' bodies. Like, how much energy could we use in such different ways when we could just let go of thinking about our own bodies and everybody else's bodies? Like, there's so much good to be done, so much more joy to have.
And don't post offensive memes on social media, and maybe call people out when they do.
That's right. And if you are a dieter and you have someone in your life who you suspect of an eating disorder, do your best to keep your dieting talk to yourself. And if that dieting talk comes from your own place of pain, I want to empower you to look at that and get support around that too.
if we could get one message out today, it's that eating disorders are not about thinness, weight, or food. They have to do with underlying feelings of powerlessness, loss of control, and food happens to be the arena where they're getting played out. So please utilize the resources, contact Jennifer, contact me if you would like some psychoeducation on better communicating with somebody you're concerned about. Jennifer, thank you so much. It has been such an honor to have you here today.
Thank you.
And having known you throughout your whole journey, I can't tell you how thrilled I am that you are doing this work.
Thank you.
This is Radnor Cable Studio 21 and Linda Hershman of the Couples and Family Relationships Wellness Center. I will see you next time on Relationship Matters.